There's enormous number of key issues that these local office holders decide. First of all, just keep this in mind, $7 billion of property tax money is decided by these local elected officials, mayors, trustees, village boards, park boards, library boards, school boards. So that's your money, and the decisions they make about how to spend it in all those various areas is very important. Yes, those people that wanted to vote by mail ballot, but either they didn't get around to it, they didn't get their ballot back in time, they can go to their assigned polling place on election day. It really helps us if they bring their ballot with them that hasn't been voted, or bring some information about that, and then they can still vote on election day, because we would be able to, if the mail ballot came in later, we'd be able to throw that out so no one could vote twice. There's a lot of things that people should know about. For one, remember little tips, for example. You've got the right to bring information in. It's not a terribly long ballot this time, like it is sometimes in a presidential year or gubernatorial year, but if you have a little cheat sheet because you want to remember the names of candidates, you can bring that in. If you have a problem, you can ask the election judges. If you make a mistake, if you have a paper ballot, we can get a new ballot and change it. So you also want to make sure that you have all the privacy that you want, and if there's anything that bothers you, you go and talk to one of the election judges. Otherwise, it's a pretty standard thing. Whether you're voting on paper and making those little marks, or whether you're voting on a touch screen where you're making your choices on a screen. It's not very difficult. For those who voted, no, it's not very hard. And feel free to take your time. We're not going to rush you through it. And while you're voting, either during early voting or on election day, if you see any particular problems, we have a hotline that you can call on election day to let us know if there's something that you think we need to look into immediately. And that number is 312-603-0236. Well, a couple reasons. Number one is we know by studies that voting is somewhat of a traditional thing. And if you start when you're young, you tend to continue it. The other thing is just keep in mind how many crucial issues that are out there that affect young people. One, of course, schools. If they're in high school, and Chicago, for example, they don't get their fair shake from the state or from property tax money as other jurisdictions, so they're discriminated against, begin right there. Or you look at colleges. Many places around the world, college is free or much less expensive, and yet the U.S. not only is very expensive, but also students pay enormously high rates. There's many, many issues that affect young people, and while they may not own property initially, and maybe they're busy in college and not paying attention, but those people are dramatically affected by the government. Therefore, it's important that they influence the government as to what policy should serve their interests as well. Voter suppression has been around forever, unfortunately. And what that means is a particular political party, and it's not all one side or the other, or individuals may try and find ways to make it difficult for others to vote. The most prominent thing going on nowadays is this talk about voter ID. We already have voters' information. When they go through a registration process, we have information to find out who they are. Voter IDs in many states, particularly southern states, are designed only to prevent certain people from voting. Just a quick little example is in Texas, when they did their brief after they were challenged in court on their voter ID law, they could not prove a single case of voter impersonation, which is why you might have a voter ID. They did admit in their own brief that there would be 600,000 people thrown off the rolls that didn't have the existing ID. Students who had a State Department of Texas ID, that no longer was any good. So all those students, even with that ID, had to go get a new ID. And it wasn't easy to get. Texas is a big state, and there's quite a few places that don't even have a county seat. So there are cases where someone could have to go 90 miles to get a new ID. So I think cases like that, they were clearly designed to hurt people. You can't have a fair playing field if the reality, because of our courts now, says a billionaire has the same free speech that you may. And so you can give $5 or $10 to your favorite candidate, and they can give $100 million. And unfortunately, because of the U.S. Supreme Court and the Citizens United in other cases, they've allowed unlimited money and they've allowed dark money. And that totally changes our democracy for the worst. So it not only means it's hard for people without many millions to run for office, think of what it does in terms of lengthening our campaign. Our last presidential campaign went from about August of 2015 through November 2016. That meant hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars every month were being spent on advertising. When people say they're tired of voting, they don't mean they're tired of voting. They're tired of seeing negative campaigns on the airwaves every day for a year and 3 or 4 months. And most of those ads are negative. Most of the ads, and many of them increasingly, are just simply untrue, or they just take a portion of the truth, and that goes for both parties. So that is a very strong disservice to democracy. There's a lot of exciting things out there around the country trying to tackle this crucial problem of money. Seattle has a great experiment going on. There's some ideas here being proposed in Illinois, small donor matching. So there are things that we can do, but you cannot have a functioning democracy if those with the most money can drown out the average voter's concerns.